New World Aeternum Weapon Tier List, because the only way to communicate information to terminally online MMO players is with uninspired content. So let's start off with the flail, which is minimum A tier, but I'm putting it in S tier because the shield is busted, and that makes the sword busted because the shield just gives you so many crazy bonus perks. You can have Enchanted Ward, you can have Enchanted, Keen, Vicious, Luck. You can also go for Shield Aggression, which gives you damage to make up for having a one-handed weapon. And I don't care what people say about like shields applying to chests or being able to get weapon luck while looting chests. I'm gonna believe the AGS employee that said like 3 years ago that if you have a sword, your shield applies luck while looting a chest. And then because of that, I'm also superstitious. I'm like, I'm putting Pearl in my sword. If I get one of those like weird luck items, I'm having that. And that's my luck loadout because I want to get loaded dice from the stockpile. Either way, like, yeah, you get so much free stuff on your shield. Who cares if it messes with your equip load a little bit? Like, it's just crazy. The skills, abilities, and perks for the flail and sword are just really good, like empowering Whirling Blade with the tactical strike so you can just get bonus damage and cooldown reduction. Upheaval's really strong, and then the change they made to Defender's Resolve with Final Countdown, 20 base damage with a round shield. That's just cracked. Like, I would have put sword in S tier, and if you watch my guides, hopefully I can convince you of that. And now it's just stronger, so that's crazy. We also have Void Gauntlet in S tier as a DPS weapon. Anyone that says, oh, you're supposed to be doing like crowd control and utility, they are just completely wrong. You lay down Oblivion, you go Void Blade, and then you absolutely shred and do unbelievable damage that dissolves everything. That's one of like my big realizations for my guides. That's also why I'm making the tier list, so I can kind of condense my guides, since a lot of people don't want to engage with that boomer content. Who wants to learn about anything where you can just get the spark notes through a tier list? And then if you get a little bit more interested, you can check out the guide. What I don't have a guide for is PvP stuff like the range weapons, musket, bow. You go musket rapier or you go bow spear, and then you do crazy amounts of damage to people at range, and then if they try to contest you, you have an out with it. So yeah, it's kind of its own weirdness. I don't respect PvP players in this game. Blunderbuss is S tier. No, I'm not putting everything in S tier. We have B tier because it's functional. It's serviceable. It can also be kind of fun with the skills, where like, oh, you're getting cooldown reduction, you're trying to like proc some refreshing move, and you're just like running around and popping people, and then you have some abilities that might get some AoE down or hit multiple targets, and if you play it right, you get sustain, you get fortify, and then you're just kind of like chilling on the blunderbuss, but also isn't, oh, if I get in melee range of something, I just like one-shot them. Nah, the weapon's actually like pretty tuned and pretty balanced, and has like a couple of other things, but doesn't find anything that's like, whoa, this is absolutely insane. Unless you're running Pestilence in PvP, but I'm pretty sure that got nerfed as well. And then they also had to globally nerf Blunderbuss because of target lock, so yeah, it's like, it's fine, you can run it, and if you really want to run it, you're not going to be like super duper slaying things, but you're also not going to be struggling. And then I put Hatchet in A to B tier because it's like a one-trick, one-dimensional thing where you pop Berserk, you're unkillable pretty much, and then you just kind of slash through everything. But if the content in front of you isn't dealt with by the time that wears off, you're in trouble. But also kinda not really, because then you can just switch to another weapon, use those cooldowns, and then wait for your Berserk to come back before you swap in. But at the end of the day, not a lot of people are running the Hatchet, so is that because it's actually not that crazy of a weapon, or because it has no skill expression, no one wants to really all in and experiment with it and find like some kind of crazy build or synergy with it, where it's like, yeah, if you just have the Hatchet, and then you combine that with like a Warhammer or a big AoE two-handed weapon, it's like, yeah, then you can still like carve up groups of enemies or a named boss with this, and then you can have the two-handed weapons to bail you out once you don't have Berserk anymore, or maybe just whatever. I don't know. Next up, we have Fire Staff, which is another tricky one, because like there's S tier moments with the Fire Staff for sure, and damage, and it's also good in PvP. You can also just kind of light things up, but then its consistency feels like A tier, and being, you know, a mage weapon, it does kind of leave you vulnerable. But then I think you just have to play it right, where if you go Flamethrower, Incinerate, you just jump in and melt groups of enemies, and if you have the Blood Drinker, you really don't feel that much of a damage loss while you're getting tons of Smolder, and then you're just popping all kinds of crazy effects and bursts, and then double Intelligence. I had a lot of fun with my build, where it's like, oh, Void Gauntlet Fire Staff. Actually pretty dope. It plays nice with other intelligence weapons and builds, so I think if you go like Bruiser Fire Staff, that's S tier, and if you're playing like long range, magey kind of Fire Staff, that's more A tier because of your vulnerability, but the peak, as I showed in my guide, is closer to S tier. Ice Gauntlet, I think that's another like B tier one where it's like fun and you do crazy things, and if you run like all of the chilling tree, so yeah, Ice Tempest. If you just do all this, you do this, and Ice Tempest is crazy. And that also has really nice intelligence synergy where it's like, use all your cooldowns on the Fire Staff, use all of your cooldowns on the Ice Gauntlet, and then you just rotate between this with crazy amounts of elemental damage and burst. Also, I guess all the elemental stuff gets a lot stronger with the pants that give 15% magic damage in a medium equip load, so that really helps out Bruiser, Fire Staff, and then melee Ice Gauntlet. And with this, you're also playing very close range on the Wind Chill. You just breathe on people, and it does a lot of damage, and then Ice Storm, Ice Spikes with the ultimate chill. Yeah, like, why are you being a coward with this Ice Pylon and Entomb when, like, you can't deal with it? Nah, you get in there, you fight, and then Ice Gauntlet's pretty good. Maybe closer to A tier. But it feels B tier. I think that's what it is. It's closer to A tier, but it feels B tier because of how good the Void Gauntlet and Fire Staff are. But that does mean it's like a distant A tier. Great Axe, S tier. I kind of said like, yeah, this is one of the best weapons, especially for like all stages of the game. The end game for Great Axe is you can dive into any amount of enemies and just carve them up and shred and do crazy amounts of damage and then find sustain. That also helps you like build out. If you're a new player and you pick up the Great Axe, you don't have to worry about juggling perks and getting lifesteal and worrying about sustain too much because it bakes in a lot. That's like, oh, use all of your abilities. That brings them down to like 30%. And then that's when your crit and crit damage and crit healing and execution healing kicks in. So then you actually get like your Berserker dream off by playing the Great Axe. And then it's very nice to build into, very simple. You can just unga bunga run it. But then when you peak, it's also a very powerful weapon. So it rewards you for everything while teaching you the game, while giving you safety and comfort. It's pretty good. The spear. The spear is pretty strong. I was kind of surprised with how strong the spear was for PvE because I thought it was PvP cheese weapon that someone gets on you and then you just kind of like kick them down and do the big stab and you just like keep sweeping and knocking them down for like CC. And if it has so much CC, that utility should cost damage or AoE or pack clearing, but it actually doesn't depending on how you build it. So just like running spear is A tier. But then, like, combo and, like really thoughtful combo spear is S tier. You just need crowd control, and then this is, like, your single target boss weapon, and then you just, like, poke them for crazy bleed damage, stacking damage, extra crits, and insane trenchant heavy attacks. And it's like, oh, wow, this actually, like, demolishes bosses in single target, and then it plays nice with other, like, AoE pack weapons or something. And then, while we're here, yeah, the greatsword is also S tier, because you have so much freedom and so much skill expression and so many cool things you can do in the playstyle or how you want to build the weapon. I really love the idea of being an active tank. That what I hate about the life staff, and life staff is almost untiered, and I guess we'll get there, is that the devs have forced you into no autonomy. That there is no other healer class except for the life staff. That like, oh, the flail gives healing, and technically the Void Gauntlet, there's like a little bit of extra sustain, and you can do things. I mean, the flail even has the cleric. The flail makes it to where you heal allies, you chain heal allies, you give allies lifesteal, and then also just passive healing, yet you can't queue as a healer even if you're like max focus. 400 focus flail isn't allowed to be a dedicated healer in the game for group content. So it's like, yeah, you're actually just like stuck and forced into it. So I don't like that idea where it's like, well, you have to go shield and sword if you plan on being a tank. But there's actually like a lot of taunts elsewhere in the game, and you can use blocks. So if you have like blocking and good blocking stability, even on like other weapons, or you can find stamina regeneration inside of some trees. But putting a taunt gem on your hatchet isn't going to be as successful as like shield, flail, shield, and sword tank. But then the greatsword, it just switches that up entirely, because like you can just use a heavy attack. And if you're in the defensive stance, then you're blocking attacks, you're tanking as though you had a shield while you're actively dealing damage, and then you're laying down other effects inside of it. And if you need a quick little pivot, you can go into some offensive stuff and deal extra damage. If you need to just like finish out the pack and clear it out, or get that last little bit of damage down, then you just go back to tanking, and you can be like complete dedicated tank as though you had a shield, which is really cool. and then you can play mixed style, or you can be very aggressive, and it just works for everything. So strength build, you put on a great sword and you just win. The hammer is also S tier, and the refreshing Mighty Gavel build I found is actually like one of the highest damage weapon classes in the game, which was really surprising to me. And then you get the artifact. Now, I'm not trying to like super duper weigh the artifacts because that really skews things, and also the availability and accessibility on that. Since, yeah, if you grind PvP track and get Serenity, that just makes all of your S tier greatsword stuff way better for free. And then with this, like, oh, everything you do on the hammer is just 20% more damage. But if you play peak hammer like I show in my guide, it is astonishingly powerful and successful and fun. And that's when it's like, yep, surprising S tier. Rapier, probably A tier. People say it's the best single target damage in the game because of all the bleed effects you can lay down on it. I'm not convinced entirely by it. I will say that the finisher, like the artifact, yeah, that's S tier because of all the extra perks and all the extra crazy effects you get from it. But it's like running Rapier, that's A tier. That's also PvP tier if you're just doing like evade shenanigans, being untouchable. But again, that's more annoyance and cheese than actual like fighting prowess. But the blood tree is interesting. You can't really do much else with it. You're also going to be super vulnerable with this build, and the scaling kind of limits your skill ceiling and other combos and like fun things you can do with it. So like, yeah, I see it being A tier even in like PvE scenarios. And then of course Life Staff is S tier because you need a healer, and whoever has more healers decides whatever PvP content is happening, or if your healer sucks, the expedition goes sideways. Healing is entirely balanced around the life staff, and I think that's a really serious flaw with the game. I hope the next weapon is actually a dedicated healer weapon, even though, like, oh, we got the flail as a new weapon, but you actually can't heal with it, even though it's like, oh yeah, you have like healing, you can do some alternative stuff with it, but not according to the devs, not according to the matchmaking. You must go max focus, life staff. You're not allowed to swap off of anything else. Life staff, flail in group content, yeah, you can. But if you're in a serious sweat mode, like, no, you're supposed to be managing all your cooldowns on the life staff perfectly, and then you're only able to use life staff abilities. And I know I have a guide where I'm like, yo, flail life staff is actually the best class in the game because it gives you that autonomy back. But a lot of people don't fly with that, even though they can be completely wrong. Like, man, if your skill issue is that, like, not getting healed for 3 seconds causes your entire game plan to fall apart because you have no preservation or not enough good gear or skill in the game to, like, stay alive while not getting babied by the healer, yeah, that's a problem. So it's like, I like this because it does give you some opening up, but at the same time, like, you are so stuck, so forced into life staff. It just feels bad. But it's also because it's that strong, and like you kind of have to do that because swapping off is just a loss of power. So there we go, guys. That's effectively a rough summary of my guides put into tier list form. Like I said, if you want extra information, go and check out like all of my other guides in the description, in my playlist, and all that fun stuff. Like, comment, subscribe. Really helps out in the YouTube algorithm. And people are going to be like, well, you just put everything in S tier. Yeah, it's because through experience, if you actually play and build properly, you get crazy amounts of power, crazy amounts of fun, crazy amounts just like of ability to take on almost any content by running these weapons. So yeah, A tier is good, B tier is playable. There's actually no trash weapons in the game, but like the lower a weapon is on the tier list, the more incompatibility there could be. Like you might think, oh, I want that hatchet, or I want that blunderbuss playstyle. Then you get into it's like, it's cool, but maybe it's not for me, or it's not as satisfying, or it's not as easy and upfront rewarding as just running the hammer and crushing an entire crowd of enemies. So there we go. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.